Revealed. How I won 333 million yet lived broke, the amazing secret my grandson helped unlock. Helen Thompson rubbed her temples, the weight of her modest existence pulling at her thoughts again. 1 year after winning 333 million, she still spent her days in the same faded apartment, surrounded by the clutter of years collected, pinned down by the values of family loyalty and hard work. The lottery ticket, tucked away in a dusty box in the basement, lingered in the back of her mind like a shadow. How was it possible that she hadn't transformed her life? The mere thought made her feel a blend of shame and defiance. It could lift us, you know, Tyler urged, his voice breaking into her reverie as they waded through the chaos of their shared past. His 30-something face showed eagerness mixed with frustration, a high school dropout grappling with a world that didn't want him. Just think of everything we could do. It's not just about the money, Helen retorted, bracing against a wave of guilt that washed over her every time the conversation turned toward wealth. She struggled with the dichotomy of her reality, wanting to help yet fearing the dangers that newfound riches could bring. As they rummaged through the clutter, memories erupted. Forgotten photographs, her husband's cherished letters. Each item unearthed a narrative of sacrifice and love. But when she caught sight of the lottery ticket, her breath hitched. That little slip of paper had the power to change everything. Doubt crept in, dark and insistent. What would her husband think of her choices? Would he endorse a life of opulence they'd never lived? Before she could spiral further, Tyler's voice pierced through. What if we made a difference, Grandma? Invest in the community, give back, change the world. Anguish spread across Helen's face at the thought. Could she jeopardize the values he'd inherited, the principles she thought were unbreakable? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The moment was rife with psychological tension. Helen felt her heart race, the walls of her home closing in. Every fiber of her being screamed to keep the lottery winnings a secret, to retain the quiet dignity she had lived by. Yet another voice, her grandson's passionate pleas, demanded she break free from the shackles of fear that held her hostage. A sudden wave of nausea gripped her as she grappled with her reality, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the box again. What if using this money meant stepping into a world she could barely comprehend? The thought of leverage and responsibility weighed heavily on her, shoving her internal conflict to the surface. As they continued sifting, Tyler found a crumpled letter from her late husband. Remember, Helen, family and trust come first, it read. Those words haunted her now. Could she disrupt the sanctity of their familial legacy by disclosing the truth? If she opened the door to opportunity, would it lead to chaos instead? The tension reached a crescendo as Helen felt her cheeks flush. What would become of her relationships, her community, the very plate her family dined from? With her health declining unexpectedly, the clock stared her down mercilessly. Each tick whispered of impermanence and fear. Would she have the strength to transform a life of quiet survival into one bursting with purpose? Or retreat into nothingness, shrouded by secrets once again? The crucial decision loomed near, a fork in the road directing her toward change or confinement. As the reality of choice settled in her bones, the air surrounding them grew heavier. Would her next step summon destruction over the threadbare fabric of the life she had built, or would they stretch, redefining the very groundwork of her family's honor? The answer remained elusive, twisting painfully in the depths of her troubled heart. Helen took a deep breath, her fingers brushing against the coarse edges of the lottery ticket that continued to haunt her thoughts. As the reality of her situation pressed in, she found herself at a crossroads. The temptation to lift her family from the shackles of financial strain battled with the fear of unraveling the life she had so painstakingly constructed. Tyler, she finally spoke, the weight of the moment hanging between them. What if we could try to make things better, but without drawing too much attention? It doesn't have to turn our lives upside down if we're careful. His eyes lit up, momentarily banishing the frustration that had clouded his expression. Exactly, Grandma. We could start small. Invest in a local business. Maybe fix up the community center? It would show that you can make a difference without it becoming a spectacle. The thought ignited a flicker of hope in Helen. Could they be agents of change without losing their sense of self? She imagined painting the peeling walls of the community center. Children's laughter filling the air. Yet a knot of guilt twisted tighter, questioning whether the money was tainted by her reluctance and hesitation. I'll need to think this through. What if I fail? She murmured, the doubts flooding her mind. This was new territory, filled with potential pitfalls. Grandma, the only failure would be not trying, Tyler said softly, but with a conviction that resonated deeply within her. She remained silent, retreating into her own thoughts. Her husband's wisdom echoed, pushing her toward responsibility. But what if embracing this opportunity meant acknowledging her capabilities fully? Perhaps she had been hiding behind the cloak of simplicity for too long. Each mental tug-of-war looped back to the very essence of her past. Courage versus comfort. Days passed in a blur filled with indecision. Helen busied herself with familiar routines, the grocery runs. Her knitting circles, yet felt a persistent tug in her chest. Late at night, she studied financial articles and community success stories, eager to understand how she might wield her newfound influence responsibly. That it wasn't long before her efforts stirred a growing curiosity within. As Helen created a plan, it became clear. She wouldn't merely bank the winnings, she'd harness them. Yet, the enormity of this undertaking escalated the stakes. She had nurtured a modest life where every penny was perceived with respect. But what would happen when she started making investments? The fear of missteps loomed larger than the fear of success. One afternoon, Tyler approached her with the idea of using some of the winnings to initiate a scholarship fund for local high school students who needed it most. It wouldn't just give them a chance, Grandma. It put something good out there that can grow. And it wouldn't be a front-page news story. The notion resonated with her, igniting a deeper realization. She didn't merely want this money to enrich her life. She wanted it to enrich others' lives, thereby redeeming it in the eyes of those who mattered most. The decision to embrace this path, however faint, snapped her from her stupor. Helen made notes, outlined potential paths for assistance, and started contacting local educators, exploring what was truly needed in her community. Each conversation sparked inspiration, igniting a newfound will to overcome fear. Yet, with progress came a creeping realization that her past patterns were difficult to shake. The money weighed heavily as a mark of ownership, but she harbored a deeper truth. The more she explored, the closer she crept to unveiling the life she'd always hidden from. In that moment, choices cascading before her, she faced the shadow of her decisions. Would she be ready for whatever emerged next? Both for herself and the community waiting for a beacon of hope? Determined, she set a meeting with a financial advisor to chart a sustainable course for her plans. Would this decision transform her timid past into a bold, open future? Or would it unleash challenges she'd not yet anticipated? As she grasped her purse, the air thickened with anticipation, pushing her toward the next step. For the first time, she felt somewhat in charge of her narrative, tinged with anxiety but also a unique thrill. What awaited her on this untried path sparked the embers of her potential. That evening, Helen settled into bed unable to shake the feeling of exhilaration mingled with dread. What unforeseen trials would lie ahead, and how prepared would she truly be to confront them? The night seemed to echo her uncertainty, compelling her deeper into a reality she could no longer ignore. Helen stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, the faint lines around her eyes deepening as she grappled with the upcoming meeting. The financial advisor, a tall man with an air of confidence, felt like both a lifeline and a monster lurking in the ocean of her anxieties. She wanted to reclaim her place not as a silent participant in her life, but as a decision-maker. The next morning, the sunlight streamed through her kitchen window, illuminating the cluttered table that held remnants of past routines. Cold coffee sat neglected beside her to-do list, which now felt overwhelming. She forced herself to breathe steadily, knowing that today was pivotal. The drive to the financial advisor's office was filled with affirmations. "You can do this, Helen," she whispered, pushing away self-doubt that had become an unwelcome companion. The car's engine thrummed with vibrations of her purpose, but as she parked, The weight of what she was about to do greenly seeped back as she entered the office. The walls bore certificates and accolades, a testament to his expertise, yet a reminder of her own unpreparedness. After a brief introduction, they settled into a room whose professionalism was suffocating. Helen's heart raced, the enormity of her choices amplifying her insecurities. "Let's discuss your vision. What do you want to accomplish with your winnings?" he asked, his voice soothing but probing. Helen's thoughts stumbled over each other. "I want to help," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "I want to create scholarships, support educational programs, bring change to my community without drawing too much attention." The advisor nodded, wisely discerning the roots of her hesitation. "That's admirable. But it sounds like a general aspiration. What does that truly mean for you?" His question struck harder than she anticipated. What did it mean for her? She had envisioned this as a chance to finally step out from comfortable anonymity, to spearhead something meaningful. Yet, the thought of direct engagement brought a gnawing sense of vulnerability. "I need to understand the financial aspects," she began, her voice steadier. "How to invest, how to ensure it lasts, how to manage what if I make a bad decision." The fear bubbled over. Would her desire for good inadvertently lead to missteps that jeopardized those she aimed to uplift? "You'll have to take calculated risks," he explained, presenting her with data that flickered against the screen, a map of potential avenues, calculated investments, and projected outcomes. He detailed how to structure the scholarship fund, laying out a path that led from seed money to real change. It felt daunting, exhilarating yet terrifying, teetering on the verge of possibility. As they delved deeper into financial strategies, Helen's initial trepidation began to morph into clarity. As the advisor explained the importance of diversifying investments, the pieces started falling into place for her. She realized she was not just investing money. She was planting seeds for generations. The more information he shared, the more her confidence solidified. "Education can change lives," she asserted, her voice filled with newfound conviction. "I want to make sure every kid in our town has a chance at the future I always dreamed for them." Her statement lingered in the air, a declaration of intent that felt monumental. Helen finally grasped that this was not merely about financial gains. It was about harnessing her past struggles to act as a beacon for others. Yet as the meeting drew to a close, doubts crept back in. What if she failed? What if she hadn't learned enough? Would she truly be able to navigate this world? Not only for herself but for those depending on her newfound initiative. Leaving the office, clutching a folder of notes and brochures, she felt a mixture of triumph and dread swirling within her. With every step she took back toward her car, she felt more anchored in her resolve, but the future remained a murky abyss. What if her decisions transformed the lives of those who needed it, yet, in the process, she put her own at risk? The complexity of it all weighed heavily, and Helen realized she hadn't fully prepared for the potential backlash of her choices. That night, sleep eluded her once again. Their excitement had unveiled a desire for change. Yet she faced an undeniable truth. A journey steeped in uncertainty lay ahead, full of risks and challenges that would test her resolve as never before. Pressured by competing thoughts and the anticipation of what came next, she closed her eyes, hoping to visualize what her life could become. But as darkness engulfed her, one final thought intruded. Could she still hold on to the life she cherished while forging a new path forward? Helen awoke the next morning, the sunlight piercing through the blinds, gilding the edges of her anxieties. The night had offered no respite. Her dreams tangled with visions of children thriving. Yet shadows hovered at the fringes, whispering doubts about her fitness as a leader. She groped for a sense of purpose amidst the chaos of her thoughts, searching for clarity that still felt elusive. As she brewed her morning coffee, Helen recalled the financial advisor's words. Calculated risks. These words echoed in her mind like a drumbeat, urging her forward yet heightening her tension. Could she really navigate this world of investments and philanthropic endeavors? Could she balance her desire to uplift others with the weight of uncertainty? Determined to reclaim her narrative, she opened the folder the advisor had given her, sifting through the materials that promised to illuminate her path. In the midst of lists and charts, a blank page captivated her attention. It was meant for notes, but to Helen, it became a canvas for ideas. She took a pen, drawing lines that connected her vision with logistical realities. She was not only a potential benefactor, she was a pioneer charting a new course. Decision made, she would educate herself, step by step, and soon found herself watching videos after work hours on financial literacy and investment strategies. Each how-to was a puzzle piece, fitting snugly into the larger picture of her philanthropic aspirations. With every lesson absorbed, her doubts began to dissipate, replaced by a budding resolve and a sense of agency she hadn't felt in years. The following weekend, she reached out to local organizations that aligned with her vision. A brief email transformed into a coffee meeting with women in her community dedicated to educational initiatives for children. Their shared insights felt like a balm for her uncertainty, encouraging her to believe she wasn't addressing this journey alone. Listening to their stories ignited a fire within her. The transformation she sought was possible, and she was not merely an observer but an important participant. However, that fire also brought one unexpected revelation. Resentment simmered beneath the surface. As Helen shared her vision, subtle jabs hinted at skepticism regarding her ability to genuinely affect change. Words like idealistic and naive drifted through the conversation like mist, unsettling her spirit. Who was she to disrupt the established order? Why should they believe she could be any different? Confronted with doubt from others, Helen started facing the deeper fear lurking within her, the fear of failure. Her ambition, once a source of motivation, became the very thing that threatened to unravel her. Rather than shrink into her insecurities, she dug deeper, using their doubt to fuel her resolve. "I will prove them wrong," she whispered under her breath as she left the meeting. Armed with newfound determination, she reached out more frequently, connecting with mentors and leveraging social media platforms to increase her understanding of charitable foundations. Each interaction recalibrated her perspectives. Blending knowledge with ambition, she was shifting from a passive observer to an active architect of change. Yet, as Helen poured herself into learning and networking, a twist of fate emerged from an unexpected source. Her grandson, Sam. Over dinner one evening, he casually mentioned how his college discussion group focused on the importance of mentorship and community support. Helen sat up, surprised. "You're talking about exactly what I want to do. Can I share some ideas with you?" In the following weeks, their dialogues morphed from casual chats to strategic planning sessions, intertwining youthful enthusiasm with her experience. Sam became not only a source of strength but a pivotal ally, crafting a vision that bridged generational insights. They tackled challenges together, his tech-savvy approach to communication blending with her passion for education. Through her interactions with him, Helen began to understand the depth of her own skills. Her ability to inspire and connect was powerful. It was not just about financial education. It was about empowering others through collaboration. With Sam's help, they simplified her vision, transforming abstract concepts into actionable items. They mapped out a potential scholarship program, carving an accessible path that they could both champion. By the end of the month, Helen stood on the precipice of her goals, staring into the horizon filled with potential. Yet the whisper of doubt remained, flickering in the shadows, reminding her of the challenges that lay ahead. The community she sought to help remained as complex and unpredictable as her journey itself. In a pivotal moment of reflection, her determination solidified. Embracing this role meant challenging established norms of success and inviting others to join her. But with every new relationship and partnership she fostered, she also encountered the harsh reality of opposition. Was she ready to confront the naysayers from her meetings? The blink of uncertainty lingered, but Helen learned to breathe through it. She had allies, knowledge, and purpose. Now it was time to put them to the ultimate test. What awaited her as she pushed forward into action? The moment of confrontation was imminent, and she welcomed the challenge ahead, ready to harness every part of herself in this evolving narrative. The dawn of the next day found Helen in a state of calculated urgency. The sun cast sharp contrasts across her workspace, illuminating stacks of documents and her carefully sketched plans for the scholarship program. She needed to take decisive action, to gather momentum before the doubts that haunted her could spiral out of control. Suddenly, that tantalizing sense of purpose stirred within her. She had formed a strategy, yet the path ahead was not without its obstacles. What would her next steps look like? Each email sent and each conversation initiated felt like a thread, weaving a connection to her vision. However, she couldn't ignore the tension that simmered beneath. Who would genuinely support her, and how could she prove her worth in this daunting landscape? With Sam's encouragement still echoing in her mind, she took a deep breath and began drafting an email to a well-known philanthropist in her network. This wasn't just any outreach. It was a request for guidance and support, a chance to open a door that could lead her further into the world she aspired to inhabit. Committing to this felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, peering into an abyss. Would she leap or retreat? Once she hit send, a wave of exhilaration coursed through her veins, yet an undercurrent of self-doubt clung to her thoughts. What if she was dismissed, her efforts deemed insignificant? She fought back this internal barrage by focusing on her motivations, recalling the passion that had bolstered her resolve throughout this journey. Determined to solidify her network, Helen scheduled and prepared for her next meetings with local organizations. Engaging with them required careful articulation of her vision. She couldn't afford to falter now. Each conversation needed to be infused with clarity and conviction. What if they pushed back? What if the skepticism of her peers materialized once more? Those queries twisted within her chest like tendrils of doubt, but she took them as challenges to be answered, reminding herself that every great endeavor faced adversity. The day of her meeting arrived. Helen entered the cafe with her heart pounding, the weight of her aspirations pressing heavily on her shoulders. She greeted a group of seasoned community leaders with an air of confidence she was still trying to fully internalize. As discussions unfolded, she presented her scholarship program with fervor beyond what she knew she possessed. To her astonishment, she found herself drawing strength from the voices of those in the room who shared her commitment to fostering change. Their feedback was invaluable, dissecting her ideas and offering constructive critique. While there were moments of resistance, the same words that had echoed previously, idealistic and naive, found their way into conversation again. Helen met them head-on, relishing the chance to illustrate her point of view. Each rebuttal became an opportunity for her to sharpen her proposals, to dig deeper and address their concerns directly. Just as the conversation began to gravitate toward a promising exchange, an unexpected voice cut through. A familiar figure sat across the table, someone who had initially dismissed her aspirations weeks earlier. Laura, a high-profile local educational advocate whose sardonic comments had taken root in Helen's mind. Laura leaned forward, her expression unreadable. If you really believe you can change this system, you need to tell us how you plan to do so sustainably. With that challenge set before her, Helen felt her heart race. This was a pivotal moment. Could she summon the clarity of vision she so desperately sought to convey? The stakes felt exponentially higher now. A demand for the proof of her ideas backed by not just passion, but strategic planning. As Helen found her voice again amidst a backdrop of probing questions and lingering skepticism, she sensed the ground shifting beneath her. Was this skepticism a barrier or a catalyst? Would she buckle under Laura's challenge or harness it? The confrontation held potential for revelation, forcing her to confront layers of her own growth. As she prepared to speak, a twinge of excitement flickered within her. She wasn't just battling doubts. She was battling her own perception of her capabilities. What answer would she deliver? Within her, tension vibrated as she braced to respond. The moment of truth loomed, one that would solidify not just her plans but her identity as a leader. What would unfold in this charged atmosphere of direct engagement? The deliberation was escalating, and Helen knew it was now or never. Standing on the edge of defining her narrative once more, Helen inhaled sharply, feeling the weight of Laura's challenge pressing against her like a physical force. The other leaders leaned in, their expectations palpable. Everything she had worked for hinged on this very moment, and she knew she could not back down. Gathering her thoughts, she recalled the detailed analysis she had prepared. Facts and statistics flitted through her mind, illuminated by the fervor of her conviction. It wasn't enough to simply present her passion. She had to ground it in reality, which meant delving into her strategy and enhancing her vision. I believe change begins with education, and that sustainable support means not just funding scholarships, but also providing mentorship and resources that empower students. She began, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. There was a slight tremor at the edge as she felt it and pushed it down, channeling adrenaline into her words. By collaborating with local educators and businesses, we can create a feedback loop that not only supports students financially, but also equips them with practical skills and networks. This ensures we don't just throw money at a problem, but follow through to help students thrive long after they graduate. As she articulated her thoughts, Helen felt the first spark of connection in the room. The previously skeptical expressions softened, and nods of understanding began to emerge. She was no longer merely defending her stance. She was asserting herself as an authority in her vision. Yet before Helen could bask in this newfound confidence, Laura interjected once more. That's a nice sentiment, but digging deeper, what measurable impacts are you planning to quantify? How will you ensure accountability? Helen's heart clenched. Laura's skepticism pierced through the momentum she had quickly gained. She sensed more than just a challenge. It was an opportunity to solidify her approach and showcase her breadth of knowledge. Great question, she replied, invigorated by the prospect of illuminating her plan further. I aim to implement a systematic evaluation process involving both qualitative and quantitative metrics. This includes tracking scholarship recipients' academic performance, job placements, and overall satisfaction with the support they receive. The dialogue heated up as Helen continued, pitching examples of successful models she had researched. The earnestness in her voice was fused with the fire of newfound self-belief. For the first time, Helen saw herself as the architect of this scholarship, not merely a hopeful advocate. Resistance turned to fascination as the complexities of her vision unfolded, their skepticism starting to morph into understanding. The meeting stretched on, filled with fervent discussions that explored the depths of her vision. Questions became collaborative ventures rather than accusations. She found herself animatedly bouncing ideas back and forth with the very leaders who had initially doubted her. The room transformed into a melting pot of ideas, and Helen thrived in this dialogue, feeling liberated and engaged. As the meeting concluded, several leaders approached her, expressing interest in collaborating. Helen felt the weight of the world partially lift. It wouldn't be easy, but genuine support was now on the horizon. However, as she gathered her files and prepared to leave the cafe, Laura's penetrating gaze lingered. The remnants of their earlier tension hung in the air. You've made compelling points, Helen. But remember, it's one thing to have an idea and quite another to execute it effectively. Be prepared. The excitement may fade, but resilience is what truly matters. Those words echoed in her mind as she stepped outside. Helen was exhilarated, but the underlying trepidation remained. Could she indeed sustain this momentum? Would the relationships forged today endure the inevitable trials? Bit by bit, she could see the outline of her identity as a leader taking shape, yet each step forward encompassed shadows of past doubts. This path was unpredictable, fraught with risks and demands for accountability would keep climbing. In the midst of her triumph, Helen felt an urgency to solidify her footing. Who could she turn to for guidance and mentorship now that she began to realize the full scope of her journey? What crucial insights awaited her just beyond this dawning threshold? The answers felt tantalizingly out of reach but essential as she steered through this evolving landscape and prepared for another leap of faith that could define her influence. This was only the beginning. She felt it in her core. The real test lay ahead, and she was determined to uncover the wisdom necessary to navigate it. What would her next move reveal? Helen stepped into the light of the bustling street, its energy invigorating yet overwhelming. It contrasted sharply with the intensity of the meeting she had just experienced. The notes in her hands felt heavier than before. They were more than just words. They were fragments of her emerging vision, shaped by a pivotal moment. Yet, beneath the anticipation lay a disquieting anxiety. As she walked, she found herself replaying Laura's critical words in her mind. Resilience is what truly matters. It stung, yet it resonated deeply, challenging her to confront her own insecurities. What if her initial burst of confidence was just a veneer? As she navigated through pedestrian traffic, she resolved that understanding the depth of resilience required more than just introspection. It needed action. Seeking mentorship suddenly became her urgent priority. who could guide her through the intricacies of executing her ambitious project. Helen's mind darted through names, respected educators, seasoned entrepreneurs, industry veterans. Each person brought their own strengths, yet Helen wondered who would resonate with her vision the most. The itch for connection grew, urging her to reach out but casting doubts on her ability to articulate her needs. Deciding to let instinct lead her, she pulled out her phone. Her finger hovered over a contact labeled Sam, her former professor, and a respected figure in education policy. They hadn't spoken in years, but Helen recalled the fiery passion Sam exuded for systemic change in the educational landscape. She took a deep breath, summoned her courage, and sent a message. "Hi Sam, I hope you're doing well. I'd love to catch up and seek your advice on a new project I'm working on. Would you have time this week for coffee?" The message sent, an unexpected rush of warmth enveloped her. It felt liberating to reach out, yet a voice nagged in her head. What if he dismissed her? Doubts from her past began to seep in, but Helen clenched her jaw, reminding herself that evolution often required vulnerability. The conversation with Sam could be the catalyst she needed to build a stronger plan. Later that evening, as she prepared her thoughts for the imminent meeting, Helen revisited her strategy. She gathered materials, weaving together her passion and the detailed metrics she had outlined earlier. Yet there was a growing realization that merely having a plan wouldn't suffice. Implementation would demand more than just numbers and intentions. It required relational dynamics, the buy-in from others profoundly entrenched in this field. She decided to draft a list of questions to bring to her meeting with Sam. What were the best practices for initiating sustainable collaboration? How could she effectively engage potential mentors and local businesses to ensure alignment with her mission? Each question became a stepping stone, pulling her from anxious territory toward a grounded preparation. As she scribbled details, a fresh wave of determination washed over her. Her vision began to take on roots, and her emerging identity as a leader felt increasingly solidified. Helen sensed that this pursuit would not merely be about her strategy. It was about forging connections that would sustain her through moments of doubt. Finally, the next day arrived, and she found herself sitting across from Sam at their chosen cafe. The familiar scent of coffee filled the air. Helen's heart raced but steadied as their conversation unfolded with warmth and genuine curiosity. As she began to articulate her vision for educational empowerment, she noticed a shift in Sam's demeanor, a glimmer of intrigue sparking in his eyes. Yet just as hope was taking flight, a familiar nagging feeling slithered back into her consciousness. Would Sam's support translate into action? The uncertainty of whether she had effectively communicated her vision loomed large. She had opened the door, but would it lead to tangible collaboration? As Sam leaned in and asked a probing question about the potential obstacles she foresaw, Helen felt a mix of trepidation and anticipation. This was her moment to address not just the inquiry, but the core of her emerging purpose. How would she respond? The fragile balance between ambition and reality dangled before her like a tightrope. Helen drew a steadying breath, the aroma of freshly ground coffee swirling around her as she focused intently on Sam's penetrating gaze. This was her opportunity to distill her vision into tangible truth, to weave her passion into reason. Yet the enormity of the moment suffused her with trepidation. She sensed the stakes as if they were etched in the very air between them. "What obstacles do you foresee?" he had asked, and the weight of the question settled squarely on her shoulders. Helen had prepared for this, or so she thought. She had rehearsed her vision, rehearsed her delivery, but that depth of inquiry struck a different chord. This wasn't just a conversation about a project. It was a challenge to her very belief in herself. She glanced out the cafe window, observing the rhythm of the world outside. A young couple strolled by, laughter spilling over as a child chased a balloon. That moment of levity contrasted sharply with the seriousness of her intentions. But it was a reminder. The obstacles weren't merely external, they echoed her internal fears. What if I fail? What if I can't rally support? The specter of self-doubt loomed large. Yet for every concern, she saw a flicker of her resolve. I think the biggest challenge will be resistance," she finally said, her voice steadying as she met Sam's gaze. Education is such a traditional field. People are entrenched in their ways. Gaining buy-in from stakeholders will be pivotal. Sam nodded, his expression encouraging. Resistance isn't uncommon. How do you plan to address that? This was the question she had anticipated. Yet the answer felt more complicated in the moment. It required her to distill her thoughts into actionable strategies. I believe that sharing stories, real, lived experiences can change hearts and minds. If I can make the data relatable, if I can show how these changes impact real lives, perhaps I can bridge that gap. Excellent approach, Sam replied. There was enthusiasm in his voice that fueled her growing ambition. You need to be both a storyteller and a strategist. Each narrative you share should anchor your vision in reality. Helen absorbed his words like a sponge, the compliment cascading warmth through her core. Yet as he leaned back, a nagging thought curled into her psyche. Storytelling was one thing, scaling this initiative was another. The logistics of implementation loomed dauntingly over her. Have you identified who you would like to involve in this initiative? Sam's question cut through her reverie. The very mention of collaboration sparked a hesitant excitement. She wanted allies, mentors, advocates. I've thought about reaching out to local educators and even business leaders who are invested in practical educational solutions. But it's still in the early stages. Connections will be key, he advised. Explore potential partnerships that could share their stakes in the outcome. You may inspire them with your vision. Helen's heart raced again, this time with the thrill of possibility. She felt unshackled, propelled forward as she imagined a tapestry of collaborative effort that could weave into her mission. But doubt, ever persistent, gripped her tightly. Was she capable of pulling together this network? Could her vision truly galvanize others into action? As she deliberated, a sense of urgency washed over her. She could not let these ideas linger without a plan of execution. What should I do first? She asked, the question punctuating her determination. Begin where you feel most vulnerable, Sam replied. There was gravity to his tone. Identify your key fear and confront it directly. Oftentimes, that fear is where your greatest power lies. Helen felt the weight of his wisdom sink in. And for a fleeting moment, clarity illuminated her path. It wasn't merely a matter of reaching out, but stepping boldly into the potential risks. The next step would define her. What fear had she been avoiding? Was it the concern of failure? Or the fear of inadequacy? The answer remained tantalizingly out of reach, a specter she needed to confront. In that molten moment of realization, a singular truth arose. She was at a crossroads. It was in her hands to forge ahead with courage or retreat into the safety of silence. The thrill of possibility edged closely against the petrifying fear of inaction that as their conversation meandered into logistics and timelines. A pivotal idea struck Helen. Would confronting this fear require her to take a leap of faith beyond what she had envisioned? The tightrope she walked felt stretched between her aspirations and her apprehensions, taut with potential energy. Would she summon the courage to take that leap forward? When the cafe door swung open and a gust of wind swept through, rustling papers on their table, Helen's pulse quickened. Would this burgeoning wind of change propel her forward, or shatter her confidence completely? The question hung there, unresolved. Helen walked away from the cafe, the clamor of the world outside melding with the pulsing beat of her heart. The questions Sam posed still echoed in her mind, bouncing off the walls of her burgeoning ambition. She pulled out her phone, her fingers hovering over the screen as she contemplated the exact moment she needed to initiate contact with educators and local business leaders. Yet, indecision clutched at her throat. How was she to present her uneven thoughts clearly to others? Start where you're vulnerable. Sam's words gnawed at her, lingering like a shadow. What was she truly afraid of? Each small task reaching out, presenting her plans, seeking collaboration took on the weight of insurmountable obstacles. The streets shimmered with sunlight, pulling Helen's focus from her swirling doubts. Children played nearby, their laughter melding with the calls of vendors setting up their stalls for the day. Their carefree lives were a stark contrast to her tangled thoughts. She felt a surge of determination fight against the creeping shadows of fear enveloping her. Before she could second-guess herself, she took a few firm steps toward the local community center. The mere thought of walking into a room dense with experienced educators made her stomach churn. Yet, she internally scolded herself. She was the architect of this initiative, The storyteller tasked with proclaiming a vision worthy of their attention. As she arrived, an unsettling mix of excitement and dread coursed through her veins. Inside, a small meeting for educators was already in progress, their serious expressions stark in the subdued light. Helen hesitated at the door, her heart thudding against her ribcage. What could she possibly contribute that would resonate? "What do you want?" she whispered to herself, the rustle of conversation amplifying her self-doubt. Helen inhaled deeply, seeking strength from within. It was her chance to share, her chance to spark change. Confronting that flicker of vulnerability could offer unexpected strength. With a final surge of courage, she stepped inside, taking a seat at the back, blending into the comfort of anonymity for now. A speaker presented on curriculum development techniques, but Helen's mind drifted. She wasn't just a passive audience member. She needed to prepare herself to face them, her fear of inadequacy transforming into a wellspring of passion. It was then that she caught the eye of a woman seated near the front, her enthusiasm spilling over as she discussed engaging students through storytelling. The eloquence in her speech shone a light on Helen's own aspirations. All at once, the prospect of reaching out to this woman became magnetic. Perhaps she could anchor her vision in collaborative storytelling. After the meeting, Helen approached the woman, her legs trembling slightly. "Hi, I'm Helen. I was inspired by what you shared today." The woman turned, a welcoming smile illuminating her face. "I'm Maya. Nice to meet you. What about it inspired you?" The words flowed from Helen's lips, a mix of her fears and aspirations. "I want to implement changes in our educational approach through relatable narratives, but feel uncertain about how to spark interest in others." Maya's expression shifted to one of understanding. "You asked the right question. Engaging others starts with authentic connection. I'd love to collaborate if you're willing to share your vision." In that moment, Helen felt a jolt of exhilaration, the chains of restraint lightened. Perhaps entering a partnership was the catalyst she needed. Their conversation continued, and as the sun dipped lower in the sky, Helen's resolve solidified. This was not just about accessing help. It was about embracing her vision with authority and passion. Still, as they concluded, a flicker of doubt returned. What if her story couldn't resonate as she hoped? The lingering fear reminded her that barriers still lay ahead. The next steps required not just ambition, but an audacity that felt tantalizingly out of reach. As she walked back to her car, Helen recognized that her fears were now intricately woven into her journey. Were they shadows to avoid? Or were they symbiotic forces that could propel her forward? A decision loomed, and the path forward wavered enticingly ahead of her. With the horizon dimming into twilight, her pulse quickened at the thought of what lay next. Would she have the audacity to share not just her vision, but her vulnerabilities? To reveal her own secrets in pursuit of connection? The moment was arriving where she would have to push past those boundaries. The next chapter awaited, a leap into the unknown. Would she emerge transformed, or would her fears reclaim the narrative? The answer remained brimming with uncertainty, hanging palpably before her as she drove into the dusk. With each passing day, Helen Thompson shed the weight of hesitation that once tethered her. Embracing her role as not just a receiver of fortune, but as a contributor to her community forged a new pathway, one etched in purpose and toned by action. The scholarship program she designed blossomed from an abstract aspiration to a concrete strategy, reflecting her dual commitment to education and accountability. As she navigated the complexities of her first funding meeting, Helen walked into the local educational foundation's office with an unprecedented sense of empowerment. Confidence cascaded through her as she exchanged the timid hesitations of her past for assertive discourse. "We must challenge our youth to dream big," she began, the words buoyant with conviction. "I propose a scholarship program that entails mentorship, connecting students not just to finances, but to real-world networks." Weeks of preparation converged to this singular moment. Helen had meticulously crafted her proposal, integrating metrics to demonstrate potential impacts, shaking free from any lingering self-doubt. External feedback from her sessions with educators and community leaders culminated in a collaborative ecosystem ready to support her. The room pulsed with energy as educational advocates leaned forward in intrigue. Questions flew, but Helen transformed them into opportunities to elaborate. These scholarships aim to break the traditional mold of education. It's about fostering resilience alongside academic excellence, Helen asserted, invoking the very essence of her vision. Moreover, as those skeptical eyes softened, she perceived admiration blooming in their expressions. It was a stark contrast to the dismissive attitudes she had encountered weeks before. Their nodding heads solidified her resolve, validating the painstaking journey taken to cultivate her new identity. Yet beneath this triumphant atmosphere lingered the specter of their initial skepticism, a reminder that the stakes were high. Driven by this pressure, Helen knew she had to go beyond influence. She needed to create an indelible impact. Her commitment breathed life into every data point she presented, underscoring how transformative this scholarship could be. Youth were not merely recipients. They were architects of their destiny, fueled by resources and experiences designed to equip them for life. After what felt like an eternity, they offered her not just financial support but partnership and undeniable validation of her worthiness. When they all stood to applaud her initiative, it became the exhale she didn't realize she had been holding. Helen left that meeting feeling not just like a participant in life's grand narrative, but as an emerging author of change, proud of her decisive shift in perspective. The future unfolded with promise, yes, but it still bristled with challenges she needed to address. Notably, how would she ensure sustainable impact, continually engaging stakeholders and motivating others? As if readjusting her vision, Helen immediately commenced drafting a communication plan. She reached out to educators for collaboration, using her newly honed storytelling skills to gain traction. "You understand the ground realities. Let us build this narrative together," she proposed in each conversation, planting seeds of shared purpose. At times, nostalgia washed over her. The stark contrast to her previous existence enveloped her like a warm blanket, but still she remained unfazed. No longer confined to the shadows of reluctance, she ventured confidently into her community's heartbeat, firmly establishing her place among those leaders she once deemed far beyond her reach. This was it. Her life was no longer a story of reticence, but a compelling tale of transformation. The 333 million ticket had indeed been a catalyst, but the real magic lay in her spirit's rejuvenation. She achieved much more than material wealth. She embraced potency and intentionality. Now, as Helen stood in the community center, she had remodeled a vibrant hub of education, laughter, and promise. She surveyed the faces of eager students, each brimming with hope. They were not strangers. They were mirrors of her resilience, reflections of a path she chose to pioneer. As she began to speak, she felt her heart swell with gratitude for the journey that had led to this moment, the willingness to step into her fears and redefine her legacy. Welcome. Today marks the beginning of your journey. Together, let us break boundaries and explore the heights of your potential. Finally, in that instant, she conquered her greatest challenge, not merely to wield wealth wisely, but to enrich lives beyond herself, forever reshaping the very fabric of her community. Helen had proven that her past no longer dictated her future. Rather, her unwavering courage set the course. In her triumph, she discovered the genuine fulfillment that transcended numbers and accolades. She emerged as a leader grounded in authenticity, daring to inspire others through her very own narrative of overcoming. Act now. The realization of Helen's journey shouldn't just end here. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep this content thriving. Comment below with your reactions and theories about Helen's inspiring transformation. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this electrifying conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second.